Here we go. We are live.
Welcome. We are headed out to the stage to do our live conversations with our religious leaders. So follow us on to the stage. Are you ready, Dr. Ferguson? Yes. Here we go. This is his book.
That's his book. Ooh. ¿Gustas? Happy closing, April. Happy closing. Happy closing. And Hannah, you're on.
It's my new favorite gig.
Yep.
We're having a slight technical issue.
Not a problem, Shannon. The master. And crew while we're waiting.
Okay, great. If you'll make her mic hot, I'll give her the thumbs up. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Please give a warm welcome to Director of Development, Charlie Ludden.
All right, well, we are going to start right now. I have Dr. Alan Levinson coming out here right now. He's going to come today. You tell everybody who you are and what you do.
And I'm a big Bible lover, particularly the book of Genesis, although I like it all. And Joseph's story is very special to me. I wrote a book about it, and I think it's just one of the highlights of the whole Bible.
Great. So what we're doing is every single show we've had, before the show begun, we have had religious leaders come in and kind of speak to you all about this Joseph story, and then me being who I am, it kind of has turned into other conversations throughout the Bible as well. But we'll try to stay close to Joseph and probably close relatives, that gives us a space, as possible. But this all came about because when Michael was getting this show together, he was looking at parts and decided it wasn't quite right for him to just make all the decisions. So he decided to reach out to religious leaders from all across the city and say, what is your perspective? And this was Jewish faith leaders, Catholic faith leaders, Protestant faith leaders, so we could get all the different perspectives that we could come up with, and only having, 6 performances that we have to crunch them all in, but how can we let other people have some input and inform our audiences? So that's what we're doing today.
Okay.
So you kind of just said something. This was not one of my questions I had originally planned, but you said you love the Joseph story. So tell me what makes the Joseph story special to you.
I would say that the Joseph story is wonderful because it operates at 4 different levels. On the personal level, it's sort of the first great rags to riches story in Western civilization. Joseph is down, he gets up, he's down, he gets up, and then of course he winds up being the number 2 person in Egypt. So I love the rags to riches story. I call that the first level, the individual level. And then there's the whole familial drama, which I think that's what most of us focus on a lot. That's certainly what the Quran, for instance, focuses on. And that's the story of, this unfolding sibling rivalry and family tension. It's really a pretty rough story at some parts. We could go into that, but it's resolved ultimately by the end of the Joseph narrative, Genesis 37 through 50. Some people say it's already resolved by Genesis 45. I don't think that's correct. I think it's not resolved till the very end of Genesis, but it is resolved. And that family resolution is remarkable because this story of sibling rivalry and family strife has been with us since really the beginning, since chapter 4, Genesis 4, Cain and Abel. So the fact that it's finally resolved and that the family is able to settle in Egypt as a family, together as a family, sets up the book of Exodus, which comes right after the Joseph story. So I love the family element, and then there's the national element, which I guess I just sort of talked about. You know, the reality is that the end of Genesis, you see the family of Jacob and wives and co-wives, or you know, midwives, however you want to describe Bilhah and Zilpah, along with Rachel and Leah. That's you know, that's a little touchy. Handmaids, I don't like to use that too much, but that whole story of how these 12 sons of Jacob become the tribes of Israel, and how Israel is now entirely in the eastern part of the Nile Delta in Egypt for the beginning of Exodus, the beginning of Exodus. So it's a great national drama too. It's the people that need to leave their land under God's direction, and then are poised to be brought back into it. That's the Genesis to Exodus piece, and then and then there's the personal level, the family level, the national level, and then finally there's the theological level, the relationship between people and God, and between Joseph and God, and this is getting a little bit long, Charlie. I'm sorry. You asked what I liked about the story, so that's what you kind of did. And that fourth level is really very unusual. For the most of Genesis, God is acting and speaking directly. And we tend to just overlook that difference between all of Genesis from 1 to chapter 36, and then in the story of Joseph, the narrative of Joseph. Of course, Joseph's relationship to God is extremely intense, and he has confidence in God, and he talks about God, including to Pharaoh, and that takes a little bit of moxie, because after all, in ancient Egypt, Pharaoh was considered a god. I mean, quite literally. And yet God is talking about it. Joseph is talking about the God, the Lord of Israel, to Pharaoh, which takes a chutzpah, technical term. And then, God doesn't speak directly to Joseph at all. And people think that surely that happens. No, it doesn't happen. God speaks once in the whole Joseph narrative, but he speaks to Jacob, and he says, don't be afraid, Jacob. This is in Genesis 46. He says, don't be afraid, Jacob, to go down to Egypt, because I'll bring you down, but I'll bring you back up, as I promised. And so I think in a lot of ways, Joseph is more approximate to I don't know, God hasn't spoken to me directly, maybe to you guys, but it's actually, I think, a lot more like our own faith relationship in the modern world. We don't get direct messages from God or in the same way. Neither did Joseph. Amen.
Right. It's amazing how we can look at these scriptures and read these stories, and we can relate our lives to them in so many different ways. One of the things you kind of alluded to earlier that I kind of want to jump into is the family drama. And we'll get back into Joseph, but are there other biblical, historical stories that we can talk about and learn about where this sibling rivalry is such a thing, but it's not just in Joseph's story?
Well, should we?
Go for it.
Okay, how about let's do a quick survey. Other sibling conflicts in the Bible.
Just shout it out.
Shout it out loud.
Esau and Jacob.
Esau and Jacob.
Cain and Abel.
I think those are the big ones.
Right
Those are the big ones in Genesis. In a way, Isaac and Ishmael, but not as pronounced. And of course, Cain and Abel, the first fratricide, the first homicide is the first fratricide, and the Esau and Jacob rivalry is so magnificently developed. It's very, very fully developed, and of course it's made more serious, if it can be more serious, by the fact that Rebecca and Isaac each have their favorites. Isaac likes Esau better because he's a manly man and he hunts and he brings ribeye home. And Rachel likes Jacob. We're not told. Rebecca likes Jacob better. We're not told exactly why, but we are told that Jacob is a quiet guy who sits in the tents. Yoshev ba'ohalo. He's the kid who brings home the A's and never causes trouble. But there's a lot of stuff going on in Jacob's head about who should be getting the birthright, who should be getting the blessing. Jacob is quiet, but he's a man about his business. And of course, there's a lot of tension there. And that tension gets resolved too, sort of. In Genesis 32, Jacob and Esau finally meet after many, many years. And Esau forgives Jacob and is ready to, and does embrace him, even though Jacob took the birthright and the blessing. So it's resolved.
When I was growing up, when I was learning these stories as a child, and for you all that don't know, I also served as a children's minister and youth minister for years and years. But one of the things is I always did as an activity for me to kind of understand and relate to the stories was I tried to put myself in the place of one of the characters. And I always chose Esau, mainly because I'm a very large man. And that's what Esau was. So I remember a project when I was younger, we traced our Sunday school lesson to trace a person. So we traced a large person to be Esau. So who was laying down on the paper? Me. So I related to Esau. So we continued in the story. I was like, wait a minute, Jacob did what? And I was so bothered. I was like, this isn't right. So then you end up getting into the next story of the prodigal son. And I think it's very interesting how you have the prodigal son, Jacob returning, but then years later, you have Joseph, his son, in this whole moment, and I'll let you jump into this one if you want to. Jacob ends up becoming almost the prodigal father, again coming back to find his son now and finding a new home.
Yeah, I'll just stick to the Hebrew Bible because although the prodigal son is absolutely wonderful. It's really amazing that at the end of chapter 37, the first chapter of Joseph's story, Jacob says, I will go down to Sheol, which was sort of the Hebrew Bible's version of what we now call hell. I will go down to Sheol, mourning for my son Joseph. And the Bible, which is very, very terse, goes an extra line and says his sons and his daughters tried to comfort Jacob, but he would not be comforted. To say something doesn't happen, the Bible doesn't do that often. So, and then of course at the very end, Joseph turns out to be alive. And then even later than that, in Genesis 48, Jacob adopts the sons of Joseph as part of his own family. And even though they're Egyptian born and bred, even though their mother is an Egyptian daughter of a priestess, well, she's a priestess, daughter of a priest. I think that Joseph's story is one of the great blended family stories of all times.
It's such a wonderful piece. You have this Joseph being this man who was literally put in the pit at the bottom, not knowing what's going to happen to him. Really, like you said, the rags to riches. And then he gets into a place of favor to fall out of it again, and to be raised to the second highest in command. So just the ebbs and flows of his life. But that didn't come with I would say some probably needed humility for him at times. Go ahead.
Well, Charlie, I want to go back to the point you said earlier about imagining yourself as Esau. I really think the world would generally be a much better place if we could all imagine ourselves as all of these characters and not just the one we've elected to be our champion. So I'm with you on that. In terms, I'm sorry. Let's go back to something you were saying about choosing.
Yeah, as they go through and we're making Joseph with his some I would say almost needed humility at times, because you have these times when Joseph was younger, kind of like that little brother who, you know, he's smaller, so you can't really pick on you physically, but he'll tell these dreams he's had of, well, I had a dream that you're all going to be bowing down to me, and if I'm an older brother and there's another, 11 of us, 10 of us, and the smallest one says you're going to bow down to me, I'm not really going to take that with him.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. And if you look at Joseph at age 17, never probably the best age to look at a young man, but Joseph at age 17 is kind of a jerk.
Right.
I mean, he's a tattletale. He's he tattles on his brothers. He is Jacob's favorite, and he lets everybody know it. The famous, I guess this play, you know, the dream code, the amazing Technicolor dream code in Hebrew it's katonet pasim. It doesn't translate very well that way. It's more like a long fringed garment with stripes. But I have to admit, in English, Technicolor dream code works a lot better.
Sounds a lot better. Right?
Yeah, it really does.
Long title for it.
As somebody said, it loses something in the original.
Right.
You know, he wears this sign of favoritism that Jacob gives him his coat, and he wears this sign of favoritism all the time, and it's no wonder that when they throw him in the pit, the Bible makes a point of telling us they take off this coat, right, which they'll then dip in blood and show to Jacob. And you don't have to be a modern psychoanalyst to say this is pretty much their way of living out what they'd like to do to Joseph when they take that coat and drop it in blood and then show Jacob their father, you know, do you recognize this coat? You know, so they're clearly getting back at Jacob for his favoritism.
One of the brothers, I think the plan was really to actually fully get rid of him. One of the brothers, correct me if I'm wrong, Benjamin, or was it Reuben?
Reuben wants to come back and rescue him. Judah wants to sell him. Yeah, little Benjamin is sort of, he's he's on the sidelines. He's going to become important to the story because Benjamin will be a test case to see if the brothers have repented, if the brothers have learned anything from their early terrible behavior toward Joseph. And of course they have, and they have grown. So it's not only Joseph who grows a lot in the story. We see that the brothers of Joseph have also grown in the story.
So that's a good point. So the next question I was going to ask you, so you just had to set up right there. Joseph uses some tactics that I would say are a little worrisome, backsliding maybe a little bit. He could have easily just opened his arms back to everybody else, but he decided to give a test to see with the rest of the family. So instead of being that wholesome, immediate forgiveness, is I'm gonna put you through the ringer a little bit and see what you do, and plants the jealous.
At some point, I hope we'll have some people. It's okay. We'll do that. We should do that. Whenever we have a chance. Yeah, he puts them through the ringer, but good. In fact, chapter 42, 43, and 44, three full chapters are basically a combination of testing, of trying, of seeing how deeply the brothers' repentance has stuck. And of course, there's also a certain amount of dream fulfillment in there too. In other words, Joseph wants to be sure that the brothers bow down to him. just as he said they would in Genesis 37. And then finally, in one of the great scenes in Genesis, and there are many of them, but one of the great scenes is in Genesis 45, the very beginning. He says to the Egyptians, leave the room. He says, motions to his brothers to come close to him, and he says, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold into Egypt. So even as he acknowledges he's their brother and then continues with their dumbstruck, he continues and then gives a little speech saying, don't worry, it was in God's plan that this should all happen. There's still an element there of, I haven't forgotten what you've done.
I know what you did.
I know you did, but I forgive you. And then in Genesis 50, he makes a somewhat similar speech saying, I would say, I really forgive you. I'm going to look after your kids as if they were my own. And then by the end of Genesis, as I said before, I think it takes the full 13 chapters to resolve all the issues.
Absolutely. For those that are just now joining, just so you all are probably not, why are there two guys talking to me when I'm normally eating my snacks? So you know, my name is Charlie Luddy. I am the Director of Development here at Lyric Theater, and I have Dr. Alan Levinson with me, and we're having before every show, we've had a religious talk back about the Joseph story, and if you know me, I go into my tangents, and if we're talking about the Bible, so I'm really going to go off into my tangents. So we kind of explore a little bit more of the Genesis area. One thing, my next question I'm going to ask you pertains to the dreams. So Joseph has these dreams, and when he is asked to interpret these dreams, that's not the safest role for a person that's interpreting dreams. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I guess I would say, the Bible wasn't written yesterday. It's a story from the ancient Near East, and dreams meant a little bit more in the ancient Near East than they do today. In the ancient Near East, Israel, Egypt, Mesopotamia, it was understood that this was divine communication. It was not, it's not 20th century concept of like, this is just your subconscious desires speaking. No, they really believed that God was speaking to you, and so there's a lot of danger in repeating them. And in all of there are three sets of dreams in Joseph. They're all double sets. In other words, first for the brothers, your sheaves bow down to my sheep, and then the stars and the moons bow down to me. Then in the prison, the butler and the baker, or the steward and the baker, they each have a set of dreams, so that's two more dreams. And then in Egypt with Pharaoh, first it's the skinny, cruddy-looking grain eating up the big, healthy grain. Then it's the skinny, cruddy cows eating up the big, healthy, juicy cows. And so each of these dreams is double, which in the ancient world meant for sure these dreams are coming from the divine. So the dreams themselves mean an awful lot in the ancient world, and the brothers immediately understand the implication of this dream, of these two dreams. It's like, you're the youngest and you're going to rule over us? You've got to be kidding. And even Jacob, the father, he says, he reproaches Joseph for the second set of dreams where the sun, the moon, and the stars bow down. And after he reproaches Joseph for saying this out loud, he then does one of these V8s, but Jacob kept the matter in mind. That's the second half of the verse. So it's like Jacob knows these are really serious. In front of the Pharaoh, I think this is it's the longest and I think the most interesting set of dreams. It's really not clear whether the magicians and the wise men of Egypt understand these dreams or not. It's really quite ambiguous in the original, and a lot of commentators have said those magicians and those wise men in Egypt knew very well this was a horrible, disastrous dream of famine that was going to follow feast. And the question is, did any of them have the nerve to say to Pharaoh, Pharaoh, I have some bad news for you. We're going to have 7 years of famine. What are you going to do about it?
Wasn't always the same. If you told Pharaoh some bad news, you probably didn't tell him another thing later.
Right, as the baker found out on Pharaoh's birthday, he impaled him for his or whatever, for his running over life. A lot of commentators would say what made Joseph extraordinary is not so much that he that he interpreted the dream successfully, is that after he interprets Pharaoh's dream, he actually continues in Genesis 41 to lay out a whole agrarian policy. It's like you have to go back to FDR and the New Deal to here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up storehouses. We're going to collect grain. We're going to store it up. And then when the famine comes, we'll be ready. And that took a lot of guts for a guy who was introduced to Pharaoh as a Hebrew, a foreigner, a lad, meaning still pretty young, and a slave. Right? That's how they introduced Joseph to Pharaoh.
Well, we have about 2 minutes left in time. So if there's, go ahead, it's your time.
Well, maybe somebody, would anyone like to ask a question?
Uh-oh, we have one. Hey! What's your question? Are we having a good time here? Is that what you said?
I'll be having a good time here.
Well, thank you all so much for being here today. I hope you enjoyed our conversations. We really thought this would be a wonderful time for you all to hear from some experts about this story and what's going on and all the work you've done. And we just thank you so much for being here today. And we hope you all enjoyed the show today. Thank you.